Hi, everyone. My name is Chantal Veroy, Director of Membership Services at St. Joseph Media. Thank you all for joining us for a virtual fireside chat with Jaime Leverton, CEO of Hut 8, to discuss the future of cryptocurrency in Canada. Jaime has served as the driving force behind the operational reimagining of some of Canada's most important technology companies. Throughout a career spanning more than 20 years, Jaime has served in a series of increasingly senior executive roles with eStructure, Data Centers, Cogeco Pier 1, National Bank, BlackBerry, Bell Canada, and IBM Canada. Some quick housekeeping notes. Please make sure to ask any questions or leave any comments you may have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll open up an audience Q&A at the very end of this discussion. Now I'd like to introduce our host, Jason Maganoy, Head of Business Development at St. Joseph Media. Take it away. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Chantal, and thank you so much for joining us, Jaime. So people are really excited about this, mainly because, wow, cryptocurrency is blowing up. It is all over the news. It seems like it is changing the world. So we're really excited to have you here and to help guide our audience about some of the ins and outs and the basics about cryptocurrency. But first, my first question is, how are you and how have you been holding up during the pandemic?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I am incredibly nervous and intimidated, so I will just put that out there in case it's not obvious. How am I holding up in the pandemic? Well, it's certainly gone on much longer than I think any of us would have liked, but I am blessed to have a job that I can do from home. And I have two daughters, they're 10 and 12, and they've been able to adjust pretty well to remote schooling. So I think all in all, we're quite blessed in the face of the pandemic. But certainly it would be nice to go back to something that looked and felt a little bit more normal.
I'd love to hear more about your career. Obviously, Chantal touched upon it in the bio. A really incredible, diverse background, but what drew you to cryptocurrency?
That's a great question and a bit of a long answer. I'll try to give the abridged version. I'm actually from a small town. I'm from Belleville, Ontario, for anybody that knows Belleville. And I was lucky enough to grow up with a father who's an engineer. And so we always had computers in the house. It started with the VIC-20. I'm definitely showing my age by throwing out a VIC-20 reference. And then the Commodore 64 after that. But what that meant was I grew up with a real comfort around technology and a love of technology. I would spend hours writing out code in the VIC-20 in order for it to say my name is Jaime over and over and over again, like such a basic thing, and would take me hours to get it to do that, but I loved it. And so I've always just had this natural inclination and curiosity around technology, which ultimately led me my undergrad degrees are actually in psychology and political science, which did not translate into a career path that made sense for me. So I did my MBA, and I did my MBA at Dalhousie University, where they had a program that offered a concentration in marketing informatics, which is really the early days of what we would now think of as big data or business intelligence. And that was an incredibly fascinating program. It was really, really unique at the time. And so IBM recruited myself and another woman from our program to go work for IBM after we graduated from that program. And really, that's how my career started. So I've had a tech career now for 21 years, and it all, I think, goes back to the VIC-20. And my career over the last 20 years has been very much focused on tech. But the second half, after I left IBM at the end of 2009, the second half of my career has been on Canadian owned and operated companies and really driving transformation and high growth mandates, which is my passion. I'm very blessed that I was able to find a career that I absolutely love and I kind of jump out of bed every day to do. And that over time is how I ended up leading Hut 8. And Hut 8, yes, is a crypto company where we are one of North America's largest publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies. But what Bitcoin mining is actually very, very similar to a traditional data center business. So I've spent the last almost 5 years at two different companies, Cogeco Pier 1 and eStructure Data Centers, and they're kind of main data center companies that focus on co-location, cloud, managed services. So I understand very well the day-to-day of running a data center business. And Bitcoin mining is essentially the same. The only difference is, instead of having customers at the end of our compute, our output is Bitcoin. But we have a 24/7 operation. We have 109 megawatts actively in production, all being applied directly to compute. But in our case, that compute is purpose built to do one thing, and that one thing is Bitcoin.
Wow. So one of my questions was, what does Hut 8 do? And you've already started answering that question. But then a main question people have is that, so when cannabis was becoming legal, people wanted to grow it at home. Like that was something that they wanted to do, and it was a big part of that evolution of the ecosystem.
Right.
Can I mine Bitcoin at home with my laptop?
No, you cannot mine it with your laptop today. But in the early years of Bitcoin, you could mine it at home, and certainly lots of people did in the earlier cycles. But the technology itself has evolved significantly, and now we don't use GPU based compute. We use ASICs, which is really, really specialized compute all the way down to the chip level, meaning it can only do one thing. It can only mine Bitcoin. So the only way to mine Bitcoin today is with this specialized hardware, which is very, very hard to source, and you need to hook it up to a good source of efficient power. So and technically, you could mine at home. It would if you could get your hand on the machine, you could, and you plugged it in at home. You might not actually make any money doing it, but you could technically do it. It would also provide a secondary heat source for you, because they kick off a lot of heat.
Wow. And that actually is a perfect segue into my next question, which is Bitcoin mining super competitive? Like, there are a lot of people in Canada in the space doing this. And then once a Bitcoin is mined, what do you do with that? What do you do with that Bitcoin? Do you just keep it? And that's amazing if you get to keep it, but what do you do with it?
Well, I don't get to keep it, Jason. So that you asked me three questions there. So in order from how you asked them, there are tons of Bitcoin miners. Do we compete is an interesting question, because as I say, we don't have customers. We're all doing the same thing in our self-mining activities. I clarify that because we also have a hosting line of business. So I do have one very special customer that is my hosting customer. So I don't want to leave them out. But we don't compete for customers. And so therefore we're not competitors in a traditional sense. We collectively add to the hash rate, and that's globally being applied to the Bitcoin network. So from that perspective, we kind of work in unison. But the more miners that come online, the less profitable mining is for everybody on the network. So it's a very interesting dynamic, which I can go into detail for anybody that wants to reach out to me. Or actually on our website, we do, in our investor presentation, we go through at a very high level how Bitcoin mining works, and a glossary of some of the terms we use in the space for people that want to get a little bit more education. That's one resource, and there are tons of other ones available. So that answers the competition question. What was your second question, Jason?
The question was, what do you do with the Bitcoin after it's mined?
Right. So we are actually Also, one of the largest hodlers of Bitcoin, and hodling is a term that's specific to the crypto industry. It stands for hold on for dear life, and it means as much as possible. So we historically we've mined Bitcoin and sold it to pay the operating expenses, and anything that was left over, we kept on our balance sheet. So today, well, not today, but the last time we released our Bitcoin balance, which was, I think, about 6 weeks ago, we had 3,012 Bitcoin that we had self-mined, held on our balance sheet. So we're incredibly proud of that. We have the largest cache of self-mined Bitcoin of any publicly traded miner in the world. And we think that's a huge advantage for us, of course. So we are a very proud hodler. We're also one of the top 10 publicly traded companies as far as Bitcoin held on balance sheet. We used to be in the top 5, but MicroStrategy and Tesla have knocked us down in the rankings by the giant positions they've taken in Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So we're in good company, at least.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously you just described, Tesla taking a huge position in Bitcoin. So for the general, there are a lot of people in the audience who are just learning about this now. So it's a two-pronged question. So what is Bitcoin? that's the first question, because I think I know. So whenever my uncle asks me, hey, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin? I'm dropping facts, but then I'm wrong almost all the time, which I think is really funny. And then the other thing is there a practical use for Bitcoin? You have 3,000 of them. What could you potentially use them? Aside from it being an asset, what could you use Bitcoin for? So those are my two next questions.
Right. Okay. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a store of value. It's in my opinion, the hardest store of value in history. And by its very nature, it is deflationary in a way that no other store of value has been or is today. People will often talk about Bitcoin as digital gold, and that is a nice way to kind of think about it. Bitcoin, of course, is digitally native. You can't hold Bitcoin in your hand. It lives in the digital world. But as far as a store of value, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. It's predetermined and therefore deflationary by its nature. The last Bitcoin will come into existence in the year 2140. And after that, there will be no new Bitcoin created. So the deflationary nature of Bitcoin is what is propelling its use case as a store of value and hedge against hyperinflation. So what we've seen globally in the backdrop of the pandemic is a printing of fiat currency on a scale never before seen, never before imagined. And ultimately, that is going to have inflationary ramifications. So more and more institutions are looking for ways to hedge against that future inflationary risk. And Bitcoin, because of its naturally deflationary nature, is an incredible hedge. I know your other question. What else?
I paused there. I was like, well, that makes a ton of sense.
I know it's so exciting, and I do get so passionate on it. You can use Bitcoin to transact. So there are lots of items in the world that you can actually purchase with Bitcoin, and you can transfer Bitcoin globally. The Bitcoin network runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in every country in the world. So it is the most accessible, transactable store of value in history. It is also the most secure. So every transaction that happens on the Bitcoin network is recorded on the blockchain that makes up the network of Bitcoin. So every transaction is immutable. It's confirmed by the Bitcoin network, and it lives forever in the record books in this peer-to-peer ledger which is the blockchain that makes up the Bitcoin network and Bitcoin ecosystem.
Wow. That actually is a really interesting thing, because it sounds like it's a super trustworthy system underlying everything in the cryptocurrency space. On the flip side, governments seem to be way less trustworthy and always on the verge of instability. So having the ability to store value in a place separate of that chaos is actually quite good. I guess my question then is, is this another way that the financial sector is just evolving and building resilience, or and how do we build more trust into the cryptocurrency space for people who are novices who want to go in, but are just not quite sure? Because it's like, it's a really funny anecdote, but like my mom goes to TD and her person at TD is Betty, and she will never leave Betty. She just loves Betty. For me, it's like, I would love to get into the cryptocurrency space. I tried to sign up for Wealthsimple Crypto, but the questions they asked before I even signed up were really scary to me. It seemed like,
really?
well, they were just more like, you have to have a risk tolerance. Like this is an interesting investment. You have to have a certain level of knowledge. You have to have a certain level of comfort level and risk tolerance before you enter the space. And do you have that? And I was like, wow, I thought I did, but I'm not sure. So
Right.
how do we build trust in the sector? Are there ways that we can do that?
So I think risk and trust in this context are almost two different things. Cryptocurrencies are incredibly volatile. They because they are decentralized, there's no central authority that regulates or can dampen the volatility, and therefore it has inherent risk. But the risk is part of the upside, the fact that it is decentralized, that you can't print more, you can't destabilize it, there is no central authority controlling it, that it doesn't have direct geopolitical risks because there is no governing body. So the risk profile is directly linked to the benefit profile. And yes, you do need to have comfort, and there are no guarantees with cryptocurrency on what the value will be at the end of the day today, or a week from now, a year from now. It's not a guarantee. But I would make the suggestion that your whatever store of value you're most comfortable with is equally not guaranteed, and potentially less so. If we continue to see these monetary easings, the stimulus packages, ultimately prices will go up and your dollar won't go as far. So if you're looking at money as a store of value, then you want the hardest possible store of value, and maybe just that decentralization is also a consideration. So I think people need to think about the risk tolerance for sure, but they need to make sure they're making an apples to apples comparison in how they think about Bitcoin with how they really think about the value of a dollar in a traditional sense.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, mainly because you can see it all over the world, currencies that just tank and are not worth anything anymore. And you can't even use them on a day-to-day basis. So it's like, it's so true. I guess my next question then is, so a lot of famous investors like Warren Buffett, they really don't like cryptocurrency. They really don't like Bitcoin. They basically call it gambling. So what are they getting wrong? Like, what are they missing?
You know what? It's very, very new. Bitcoin was born out of the financial crisis that occurred in 2008. It's unlike any other store of value in history. I think it has its own language. It operates digitally. You can't see it. You can't touch it. It's something that takes a long time to really understand how it works and get comfortable with it. And if you're not digitally native, that can be a big leap. I think the best way to answer that question would be to refer back to 4 years ago and read the list of detractors 4 years ago that said it was gambling, it wasn't going to be a thing, it was a bubble, it was going to go away. And a lot of that list has become pro Bitcoin over the last
Wow.
6 months. So our list of high profile detractors gets smaller and smaller and smaller every, I don't want to say every day, but it's getting consistently smaller.
Wow. And you're right, it is so new, but as it matures, people just get more versed in it. But one of the amazing things about this space is that the speed at which new things appear is unbelievable. And this actually is taking me to my next question, which is about NFTs. So non-fungible tokens are, man, if you're on TikTok, it's all anyone's talking about. It's the only thing anyone is talking about. Big story in the New York Times about that NFT that was sold for almost 70 million at auction. So for people who, like, what are they, number one? And are we missing the moment right now if we're not just grabbing these? Because people are sharing things with me saying, hey, you should buy this. And it literally is like a really beautiful hologram.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I don't know. So am I missing like, what is an NFT? And are we missing the moment right now if we're not jumping on board? Because it seems to be the most exciting thing out there right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer in a couple of different ways. The innovation that has been enabled by this technology is absolutely incredible. And that's what we're seeing is just an explosion of creativity and innovation based on this new fabric of technology that's been created through blockchain. And it's so fascinating to be a part of, and it's an incredible time in history. But I would draw a parallel to the early days of the internet, and as the internet was kind of first coming into existence and gaining popularity, the innovation that was spawned off of the creation of the internet is very similar to what we're seeing now in the world of blockchain. So it's incredibly exciting, and I still think we're in the early days of where this innovation will ultimately be able to lead us. With respect to NFTs, so Bitcoin is a fungible token in that you can trade one Bitcoin for another, and it serves the same purpose. In the case of NFTs, they are unique. So think about it as like an original piece of art. There's only one original piece of art. You can't trade it for another one because there is nothing else like it in existence. NFTs are basically the digital version of an original work of art. And should you buy one? I don't know. You feel like you have a use for an NFT. Like it depends kind of where you think it might fit in. I think there's going to be some really, really exciting things coming in NFTs that bridge between the traditional art world and the digital world, and where these things will be able to live in both in a way that hasn't historically been possible. I know the chairman of our board is just an incredible visionary, Bill Tai, and he was one of the early investors in CryptoKitties. And CryptoKitties were really they're the OGs or original gangsters of the NFT space, and they came into existence during the last cycle. So NFTs aren't actually new. They're having a resurgence, and there's a whole bunch of innovation coming into the space. But I think there's absolutely a place for them, and I think we're in the early inning of where NFTs will ultimately go on the innovation spectrum.
Wow. In terms of the innovation side, obviously it felt like NFTs came out of nowhere to me. Is there anything coming up that we should know about? Any trends that you can share that you're seeing and that you're super excited about?
I'm super excited about the space becoming more integrated in the traditional tech space. I'm excited for it to no longer be this industry to the side that's kind of niche and cottage, and it's not really considered part of the technology industry. I think as as we start to see these two things coming together, the traditional tech industry combining and integrating the innovation and excitement and energy that's happening around the blockchain ecosystem. I think that is where I'm spending a lot of my my thinking and where a lot of my strategy is coming from, is actually bringing these things together and seeing what can be created when that takes place.
So my next question is, obviously there's so much interest now. It's so funny. Like, I get a lot of my, it's a joke, but I get a lot of financial literacy and wellness information from TikTok. So TikTok is just killing it right now when it comes to this space. But, if you're new to this space and you're seeing people that having a lot of success in it, and you're curious, what are 3 resources that you can recommend that can help someone get up to speed as quickly as possible when it comes to cryptocurrency, blockchain, and this particular sector?
I think you really have to do the work. I think because of the risks involved, because of the complexity involved, the scale involved, I think that that the best place to start is actually, this will age me for sure, but books. There are 2.
Books are okay. I'm joking.
Yeah, the first book I read on this space that properly took me down the rabbit hole and really set the foundation is Blockchain Revolution. So Blockchain Revolution is an incredible book written by our own Don Tapscott, very highly regarded Canadian leader. So I would really recommend to start with Blockchain Revolution to get the foundation and understand some of how it works and the real world use cases involved. I would also read the Bitcoin Standard to get a grounding in what is money and how does Bitcoin fit into it as a store of value. So I would start with those 2 books, and then I would go to podcasts. There are so many incredible podcasts out there. Robert Breedlove does a really, really good series on what is money. I would recommend Robert as a great starting point. Michael Saylor has a lot of really, really good interviews out there. He did one recently with Ross Stevens. It's an hour-long interview. You can watch it on YouTube. It's fantastic. Yeah. So off the top, that's where I would start.
Those are great resources.
I will put a warning on this, which is once you go down the rabbit hole, you can spend a long time down there.
Well, I mean, it's funny because you just described some great resources, and they're all written by men. Is the cryptocurrency space diverse? Like, are there a lot of women in the crypto space right now?
Are there a lot? Look, it's still it is a male dominated sector of the industry. The tech space is still a very much male dominated, and the crypto space is no exception. We are incredibly blessed at Hut 8. We have a properly diverse leadership team, which is incredible and certainly unique in the space. There are some really, really impressive, powerful women in this space. And I will say I haven't actually come across a woman in this space that isn't incredibly powerful, incredibly intelligent, incredibly well versed. So I encourage everybody to seek some of them out. But we need more. We absolutely need more, and I think it's on us as leaders, female leaders that are here, to be accessible and act as role models to encourage more women to come into this space, because I think it's an absolute blessing that we get to be part of an industry that's driving this much change, this much innovation, has an opportunity to do so much good for the world. There's nowhere else I would want to spend my time, and I think we need to make it infectious for women to want to be here too and to see themselves here.
I love that. And it's such a great philosophy, because it was that thing when the internet was starting out, and it was like, you can watch the internet happen or you can help make the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
And in this case, like getting as many diverse people as possible, different points of view to help make what will be a huge part of our future is just a really important for us. And we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A chat box. But before we do, one of the things that I'm noticing, and this is about the future of cryptocurrency and blockchain, I'm noticing that I'll see like really cool crypto events, and then I'll see the sponsor list, and it'll be like TD and like totally the banks that are like kind of in opposition to what it's all about. Is that a future that's coming up for this space, that it's going to start merging more with government and more with central banks?
I think Bitcoin's now crossed over $1 trillion market cap. And I think once it hit that milestone of being $1 trillion of value, it became impossible for the traditional banking industry or central governments to not pay attention to and figure out how they're going to work with it. So yeah, it's just the beginning. They're coming around.
I love that. So we're going to open it up for questions now. So we've and his question is, what does mining actually look like, mean or look like? Can you explain the process to everyone as if we're 5 years old?
Oh dear, that is not easy to do. What it looks like, you can actually go on YouTube or reach out to me directly, and I'll send you a link that does a virtual tour of one of our facilities, our facility in Medicine Hat. So if you want to see what it looks like, that's the best way to see. But for me to describe what it looks like a bunch of data centers full of servers. That's what mining looks like.
That's amazing. It's funny because like whenever you're hearing something new, you always try to compare it in your head to something that you know exists. And I'm just like, not quite sure what that was. So I guess there's another question here. And it's a question from Louis. So it's a practical question. What happens when you lose Bitcoin on a transfer to your Nano Ledger? I omitted the last digit of the code on the transfer. Not sure if they're lost forever.
Uh-oh. I don't know the answer to that. I can't help you, but if you want to send it to me directly, Jamie@Hut8Mining is my email address, and I can find somebody that might have the answer.
Amazing. A question, do you also deal with Ethereum? How does it compare to Bitcoin? Is it like an early stage of Bitcoin?
Ethereum is completely different from Bitcoin, but it is the second largest cryptocurrency in terms of size, scale, value. So we don't mine Ethereum, and we don't hold Ethereum today, but it absolutely has a significant place in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And Ethereum was founded by right here in Canada by Canadians. So we it's not part of our strategy today. We're Bitcoin purists, but I have a lot of respect for Ethereum.
We have a question from Nate. I see a lot of people investing in Bitcoin, which makes it extremely exciting. I've traded stocks for a long time, and I'm now only learning to be less emotional. My worry is that some of the people jumping in without experience in trading may feel they get burned with volatility and never come back. What are your thoughts? How do you feel this gap can be closed as this market grows so quickly? That's interesting.
I think investors have to use a lot of caution. The volatility is real. It's incredibly difficult to predict. And if you're not comfortable with the volatility, you should not come into the space. And I think that it's a tough message, but it's absolutely true. You have to make your peace with the volatility and the downside risk. And frankly, you have to make peace with that downside risk being to zero. And if you can't get comfortable with a risk that could go to zero in a nuclear winter scenario, then it's not the right investment vehicle for you.
So one of the things that I whenever anything is new, part of what happens is that all of a sudden there are lots of experts out there. Like one of the things on TikTok, for example, is there are these young people who say they can read the volatility and they know exactly how it's going to function. So is it possible to be an expert in a field that's so new?
I don't want to say it's impossible. There are people out there way, way, way smarter than me, and potentially there is a way to crack the code. I'm not aware of anyone who's successfully done it. I wouldn't want to. You don't want to take that bet unless you're like really, really certain that you're the smartest person to analyze Bitcoin in the world, because it hasn't been proven out.
Great question from Catherine. Hi, I'm entering law school in September at Ryerson, a school with a technology focus. Where do you see a need for law within cryptocurrencies?
There's so much happening in the regulatory environment around crypto, around any new industry. I joined Hut 8 on December 1st, and I brought on an incredible general counsel who's also our EVP of regulatory. She started on February 1st. I think there's a world of opportunity and need for good legal understanding of this market, and certainly also combined with the regulatory environment as it continues to unfold.
This is a great question from an anonymous attendee. Hi, Jamie. What is your price prediction for Bitcoin by the end of 2021?
I am definitely not allowed to make a price prediction. And look, I'm long Bitcoin. We're obviously long Bitcoin. We hodl and we think about Bitcoin over the long term, and you kind of just have to ignore the volatility that's going to occur in between. So where it ultimately lands and over what time horizon, I couldn't predict. What I believe is we'll continue to see an upward trajectory over the long term, but it will be a wild ride along the way, as it has been since it started.
In terms of the wild ride, like I remember when TikTok was having trouble with the United States and the US banned TikTok, and it was just like, oh, big trouble, they're in disarray. Do you ever worry about like the regulation from a government, like if a powerful government like China or something were to say, hey, listen, we're done with cryptocurrency? Do you think that would be like, how do you control what governments do, especially governments that are like that?
You definitely cannot control what governments do. It's part of the beautiful thing of Bitcoin, because nobody controls what Bitcoin does. The decentralized nature of it is part of the beauty in its creation.
I have a question here, but I'm not sure if you can ask, if you need a clarification on it, you can ask. But the question is, what are your top 3 Bitcoin picks this year?
What kind of picks?
Just now staring at the Q&A, waiting for this person to respond.
I don't know what a Bitcoin pick is. I know how to pick top athletes, but
that's Bitcoin's
Bitcoin.
And that's actually something that's happening with the NFT space, like sports highlights, sports memorabilia. It's unbelievable, and it's so funny. Just sort of like this idea of what I love. What's been happening also with this space, this idea of what is value. Like that is just a really phenomenal discussion. And I was talking to one person who was talking about some of the NFTs that he had, and he had like Kings of Leon. They have an NFT which is their new album cover, and I thought that was really cool. And I know Justin Bieber is moving into this space, so clearly I'm going to follow him. I'm going to follow JB into the NFT space. So if we have, is there any other questions from the audience? If anyone else would like to ask anything, please pop them into the Q&A. But if not, then I have one last question for you before we close it up. The pandemic is over. We are all good. It's Q4. What is the first thing you're doing once the pandemic is over?
I think the first, I can't answer the very first thing, because I don't think it'll be a moment in time. I think it'll be something that, slowly occurs. We slowly open back up. But what I'm really looking forward to is planning a trip with my family. Like I feel like as I mentioned, I've got 2 girls, and travel is something that we absolutely love and cherish as a family, and just not being able to do that for this window of their wee little lives while they're still at home, and they will go where I tell them to go. I really want to make up for some of that lost time with them, just, making new memories. It does feel like one of the struggles in the pandemic is it's a bit of Groundhog Day every day, and we lost out on the opportunity to make some memories that really stand out. So that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Wonderful. And there's actually another question that came in, and it's actually a compliment question. It's from Shamima. Are you hiring?
We are always open to talent.
Amazing.
I've done a ton of hiring since I arrived, for sure, because we are absolutely focused on a growth trajectory.
I love that. And that's actually the perfect way to end this Fireside Chat. Jaime, thank you so much. I'm an expert now. So find me on TikTok.
Good for you. I am not. I'll never be an expert in this space.
But thank you so much. It was incredible. And it was great to learn more about what is one of the most exciting spaces right now in all of innovation and finance. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next one, but stay tuned for more. But thank you everyone. Stay safe. And looking forward to seeing you at the next TL Insider Fireside Chat. But thank you, Jaime.
No, thanks again for having me. It was a real pleasure.